And welcome to Crush Our Convo, where we're crushing the conversation one episode at a time. I am crossing the streams as my love for fantasy and sci-fi collide with writer, actor, producer, Stephen L. Sears. It is truly an honor having you on my show today.
Oh, thank you. Actually, it's quite an honor to be here.
Thank you so much.
We were just discussing the fandom that surrounds your head there, all of that stuff.
All over the place. Yep, I could do.
I love it. No,
I love it.
One of the wonderful things about fandom is the passion.
Oh, absolutely. My husband's also a huge nerd, so this is also part of his.
You know something? There is something to marrying a nerd. I will say that.
Exactly.
As somebody who definitely did the same thing.
And can't go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's cannot go wrong.
There you go.
Now, I did want to show you something. I think I showed this to you on social media, but for the audience,
Yep.
23 years ago?
Oh, yes, when I was 14.
I can't believe I'm older than you. I was 16 in that photo.
Now, what's funny is I'm actually looking at the camera strap to see what camera I had at that time, because that'll age me. But if you look down by my hand, you see a watch face.
Yeah.
That was a Swiss belt watch, and I have not worn that for a couple of decades. So
that's probably the last time you wore it.
Wow, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was at the convention of 2002. And I remember that one being special because Kevin had just passed away.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, because this was my second convention. And if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, Kevin Smith, who played Ares in Xena, he sadly passed away far too young. And we lost him way, way, way too soon. That was like my first celebrity death where I was just heartbroken because Xena was so important to me.
Yeah. And Kevin was just a wonderful person, just a wonderful actor. Gorgeous and just so great to hang with and chat with. He was just a really good person.
Yeah, and I had heard he was funny and super sweet, and I was so excited because he was going to be at the con and I was going to meet him. And when we got the news from the fan club, I was absolutely devastated. But I remember that convention being so different from my first convention that I went the year before. It felt more like a memorial, like we were all, like the fans and you guys and the actors were all just mourning together and celebrating his life.
Yeah.
I remember I had a picture of Kevin on my backpack and I put safety pins on it and everyone was all like, oh, and they took a picture and, stuff like that. And I was like, that was an experience. Like, I can't really explain it, but it was a true, wonderful experience. And it
was like, we were backstage kind of waiting to hear what was going to happen with Kevin because he was on life support.
Right.
And when we found out that he had passed, I was standing near Bruce Campbell. And, everybody just kind of looked at each other. We didn't know what to say. And then Bruce said, he said something to the effect, he said, at least we were all together when we found out. And I looked at everybody backstage and I said, yeah, we're all here. And he did a wonderful thing. He gestured out toward where the fans were, and he said, no, we're all together.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a moment of family.
Yeah, it really was. I think that's a perfect way of saying it. Moment of family. It was, you guys meant so much to us, and I know us fans meant so much to you, and just being together during that time. I was only there on that Saturday, but I know you guys there were the whole weekend. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely a moment. But back to Sorry to little downer there for a hot second. Just
Well,
wanted
you
to
know what?
mention
But
that real fast.
Kevin's life was not a downer. Kevin's life enriched every one of us. So
Yeah,
we mourn for his passing. We miss him, but boy, he brought us so much. So, we
he did.
celebrate it.
Definitely, absolutely. Now, before we actually get into your career, I kind of want to know a little bit more about you. And I know you were a military brat.
Yes.
Okay, so you moved around a lot as a kid. Do you feel that held you back a bit because you never got to stay in one place, or do you think that broadened your interest in learning new things that led you into the career you have?
This is an interesting conversation with all brats. We refer to ourselves as brats.
Yeah.
There are some people, I think somebody actually published a book about growing up as a brat, and that book was kind of negative toward the experience, and I don't deny that was their experience. I will tell you that it was completely normal for myself and all my friends who did this. So there was nothing we could compare it to.
Right.
I think it did a lot for me. I mean, first of all, we traveled a lot. We were stationed in Europe for a while, got to meet a lot of people, a lot of different cultures. And for me personally, every 3 years, I was in a new school with new friends. I had to invent myself, or at least try to assert myself. So I became a little more gregarious. I became, the class clown. I would make jokes and things like that. And, people tended to like me. But I still have friends that go back to when I was in 3rd grade or 4th grade. So now, having said that, those of us who live that lifestyle, there are things about, I'm assuming you were not a brat. There are things about your life or most people's lives that we understand, but we can't identify with. The idea of being born in one town, going to school with the same friends until you graduate high school, nesting, maybe getting married, staying there, having a family. The nesting part of it, we don't understand. We are used to keeping boxes because we have to pack up every 3 years and move. Mm-hmm. Now, by the same token, you don't understand what it's like to be lulled to sleep at night by looking out your window at the artillery fire flashes in the distance on the training grounds and hearing the thump, thump, thump. That's actually soothing. Now, it's not soothing for somebody who's been in combat, but for a child, I was used to that, playing out in the backyard and watching a flight of, Cobra helicopters or Huey helicopters just flying over while you're playing there. On the military bases, whenever retreat was played, that's played in the evening when they retire the flag. Everybody on the base, when they hear that music, they stop. They get out of their car, they turn toward the music or the flag if they can see it, and we put our hands over our hearts, and we observed a moment of silence. These are things that I grew up with. I'm totally used to it. And some of it was not fun. During the Vietnam War, we were stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And if you saw a street of kids who were just playing and having a great time, and then suddenly a military or official sedan was driving slowly down the street with a minister and an officer, every kid froze on that street and just hoped and prayed that car would not stop in front of their house, because it meant somebody probably didn't have a reason to be on the base anymore. So it's a completely different type of experience. But as far as it helping me, yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it.
That what you just mentioned there reminded me of that scene in A League of Their Own, when they showed up in the lockers and no one knew where they were going to go to, and it was such a somber moment because you're watching this and everyone's quiet and they're just like praying that it's not them, right? It's like passing. And it's, I could never, I don't know. I mean, my stepdad was in the Air Force, but before I was born, so I don't understand that experience. But but again, moving around and stuff like that, how did you get your imagination going? Did you love books, comic books, television, all of it?
Is it nature or nurture? I have a very, very vivid imagination. Everything becomes fantasy material. Everything becomes a possible story. When I would read books, I would actually read the dialogue parts out loud because I wanted to feel what the character felt like on the page. As I said, every 3 years, I had to become gregarious. So I was more open with this. So I I pushed the boundaries a lot. I also had great parents. My parents did not, tell me, oh, you shouldn't do that. Don't embarrass yourself. They certainly acknowledged when I did embarrass myself, but they put very few restrictions on my imagination. They loved it, as a matter of fact. So, it's a part of me that I have had, but I think that almost everybody has that inside of them if they can kick down the walls, the social walls, the norms, the peer pressure. If you can kick that down and let that little kid play again, you'll find that kind of imagination. It's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's funny because like you went to school to be a doctor, but you really wanted to be an actor. And I love this story where you had heard producers like, the same scenes that they're, auditioning, and you're like, I'll just create my own. And because you were looking into like writer's guides and stuff to kind of help you out, all of a sudden you talk to somebody and they're like, hey, submit the script. And all of a sudden, boom, you're a writer.
Yeah, I had no intention of being a writer.
That was absolutely amazing.
It was, again, I'm a storyteller. Actors are storytellers. We're all storytellers. Yeah. I just was searching for the right way to do it. I don't know where my acting career would have gone. I still love acting. Acting is like so cool, but writing is just a little bit cooler.
Just right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I fell into it.
Which is funny because my question actually is going to be, did you feel that this was your calling more than being an actor? Or do you feel like the writing was just an added bonus? Being an actor?
Well, again, I have analyzed a lot of the things that have happened in my life just to try to figure out where the transitions were and how I got to where I am. Because, there are ups and downs and there's like stress and things going on. But I got to tell you, I'm actually kind of happy with where I am. So a lot of this is trying to put labels on who I am. So was I a writer? Was I an actor? What was I intended to be? That's why I reduce it to storyteller. I am a creative person and I'm a storyteller. My mind just always works that way. Things start to fit together. I look at things with a different perspective, but I realize over my entire life, that aspect of me was always there. It applied to everything, whether I was going to be an actor, whether I was going to be a writer or a director or anything that I would have done in the creative areas would have been me. Now, as a doctor, I don't know. Thank goodness for chemistry. That probably saved all of you out there. So I did not end up being a doctor.
Like a C- or something?
I got a C in chemistry, and that's kind of not really pre-med material. So I was like, what am I doing? Valence bonds.
To me, a C is not bad, but yeah, for a doctor, you kind of
if you want to go pre-med, you really shouldn't have a C in chemistry, especially not in a basic chemistry course. Yeah, not bad.
The bottom of the barrel.
Which is not to say I didn't burn a few structures down by playing with chemistry, but
that's a totally different topic, right? Exactly. That's a whole other conversation.
And I think, no, actually the statute of limitations are up. I could probably talk about it, but let's not. Let's move on.
Okay, sounds good. Now, I'm actually going to be going to show you some of your writing credits here.
Who's that woman? Okay. Who is that?
Who is that? That's not Xena. What's going on here? So, I mean, great shows here, man. Like the A-Team, Superboy, and Swamp Thing. And of course, Xena's like the best show ever. Walker, Texas Ranger. You were creator and writer of Xena. I mean, out of all of your writing credits, which one did you have the most fun on?
It's the old favorites list. This is not a cop-out because I get asked this a lot. What's your favorite episode? What's your favorite character? What's your favorite?
Oh, I bet.
I'm not geared for favorites. I'm not. Because if you ask me that question, 10 minutes later, you can ask me again. I will change my mind. It'll be another answer. I always try to equate it to, which one of your kids is your favorite? It's the one you don't hate at the moment, the one that is giving you the least amount of problems.
Right.
Now, I can think of ones that will, shows that will always be special to me because I know how they changed my life. The first show I ever worked on was a show called Riptide. And absolutely, that will always have, a place in the Sears Hall of Fame, as far as I'm concerned. I met some wonderful people. I mean, I was writing with my best friend at the time, and suddenly they're paying us all this money to do what? Create stories? Wow. The two producers that were on that show are still close friends to this day. Obviously, Xena is one of those shows. Right. Xena absolutely altered the course of my life in many different ways. So those two shows are right up there. But then again, I've loved every show I've done. It's not to say that they are resistant to criticism. Some people would think some of them were bad, some of them were great. But I can tell you, I put as much as I could into them. I fought the battles that I had to fight to try to get what I wanted to see on the screen. Won a few, lost a few, but I'm proud of every show I've done.
Nice. So, of course, we'll talk about our favorite here because... So, again, showing some of your writing credits with Xena, DreamWorks and The Greater Good, An Intimate Stranger, Lost Mariner, R.I.P. Tony Todd, who was also a Star Trek actor. He did amazing characters in Star Trek. And then, of course, Bittersweet, which was the amazing musical, and Sacrifice, Past Imperfect, Endgame, Succession, and so much more. So just naming these off, what inspired you to do such hard-hitting emotional episodes that really developed these characters? I mean, these are all truly like just memorable episodes.
No, thank you. Well, for one thing that it's hard for me to judge myself at times, so I'm going to go by what other people tell me.
Okay.
One thing that I'm known for is creating characters. Actors tend to like the fact that the dialogue tends to flow naturally and it tends to work with their character. And I think that goes hand in hand. If I understand a character, if I can feel that character, then the dialogue is just natural. It's almost like taking dictation at times. So every episode that I've ever done, there's a deeper meaning on a character level. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm trying to push an overt message. In fact, when you try to do that, you fail almost every time. But I have my own feelings. I have my opinions, but mostly what I want people to do when they're watching an episode I've written, following a character that I either created or I'm writing at the time, I want the audience to feel something and reflect on something. Because as I write these things, that's what I'm doing. If a character feels pain, you're actually connecting with me because I have felt pain. And that comes into my character. If there's questions that a character has, I have had those questions. I've had those dialogues in my head. So I want the audience to somehow resonate with these characters, but they can't do that unless it's resonating with me to start with. So each one of those that you brought up there, each one of those has a reason why I came up with that story. And a couple of them were basically I was told to do, it's like Rob Tappert would come to me and he'd say, I want to do a story about Xena. She has a son we didn't know about. And I grabbed that one immediately because I already had a story that I thought was a very interesting story. And I put it in a filing cabinet. One day, maybe I'll be able to tell it or at least tell it to somebody else because it was something interesting. And then he gave me the opportunity. And I'm like, oh, here's the story I want to tell. So yeah, it's the other question is, where do you get your ideas for stories? Every writer gets that. And my flippant response, although it's 100% accurate, is I can't turn them off. I can't stop them. I always have these things that go on in my head. I always try to shift my perspective when I'm looking at something. And I always question myself if I react instantly. If something happens and I react instantly, first thing I do is I look at myself and I go, wait a minute, that affected you. How did that happen? What happened there? And then sometimes out of that, wait a minute, a character. And if I did a character this and that character interacted, and then, you're off to the races.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's kind of funny because when Xena started, I was 10 years old up until I was 16 because it was on for the 6 seasons. And that show actually got my imagination going.
Cool.
So I kept thinking of like okay, so like you mentioned Solon, okay, that's the sun, that's the hidden
Yeah.
sun. And I was like, well, what if there was like also Boreas had a half daughter that he hid, and now that he's gone, Xena had to find her and like save her from the gods or so. I was creating all this stuff, but it was
Yeah.
like getting my imagination going, and I would do fan fiction, and I started role playing it just because that was a way to just fill in those moments, because the
Mhm.
show was very episodic, but there was definitely a continuity of stories, especially with Callisto and all that stuff,
We were
intertwined.
episodic for the first season. The
Yeah.
second season, we started to leave that, and by the third season, we were one of the first heavily serialized series, certainly in syndication.
Yeah.
You did
Yeah.
not do that back then, but we
Hmm.
did. And by the way,
Yeah.
there's a sign on the door of creativity, and you already used it. And it's the door that every creative person has to open, and they've got to read that same sign every time. Do you know what it was? You already said it.
I did. Oh no, I'm being quizzed. I was babbling. Imagination?
Nope.
Oh no?
Nope.
Okay, what was it?
What if?
Oh, the what if. Aha.
That's
That
where
makes
it all
sense.
starts. You take something
Mhm.
for granted, something is presented in front of you, and that's normal. Everybody experiences that, or you don't even really want to notice it, except when you do notice it and you say, but what if? That's where the creativity begins. Because when you say, what if, you're saying, I'm not going to take what's in front of me as standard. That's actually real. I'm going to
Mhm.
now put it into my world of imagination and ask this question, this magical question, what if?
Cool. I love that. Yeah, it helped me with my writing. My uncle's actually an author. He
Hmm,
does poetry and stuff like that in the Chicano community.
very cool.
And he was the Los Angeles poet laureate
Oh, wow. Awesome.
for a time. And so I feel like I have my uncle's imagination too. Like that's where the, the writing
Yeah.
flows.
Well,
Um,
it is, but you know something. I think having an uncle like that certainly allowed you to express it because
yes.
you had a validation for it. And by the way,
Mhm.
people shouldn't dismiss poetry. Everybody thinks, oh, you rhyme words and that's poetry. No, that's not. You know
Nope.
that. No,
No.
absolutely. Poetry hits you right in the chest. Rhyming
Yes.
words are just one of the possibilities you can use. Good poetry is
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah, my uncle, he was in the gangs, the
Hmm.
LA gangs back in the day, and he left the gangs and survived it. So that's a whole story.
Mm.
But what he did though is he created a bookstore
Oh,
to help kids be creative in their own arts, whether that be music, poetry, writing of something, or whatever, and get them off the street.
that
That
is
was his
good.
goal.
That's awesome.
So, and they just celebrated like, I don't know, 23 years. It's called Tia Chuchas. And so I always had that mindset of just being, like you said, open, being able to just express myself,
Hmm.
And my mom was always a big supporter of me, no matter what I came
Yeah.
up with and told her and all that stuff. She was like, that's a great story. She used to call me her Amazon just because I'm like 8 inches taller than her. And so that was always like the nickname she had for me. So, but she was all like, she knew how much I love Xena. She knew how much it meant to me because during that period, I was going through so much
Hmm.
in my life, to the point of like the deepest, darkest things that a child should not go through. And
Hmm.
Xena was the light that I had to keep going. And I'm actually going to be playing a scene. This is my favorite scene in the entire series.
Uh-oh.
And it stuck with me this entire time. And you just so happened to write it.
Uh-oh. Well, let's see what it
So
is.
here we go.
See how calm the surface of the water is? That was me once. And then... the water ripples and churns. That's what I became. But if we sit here long enough, it will go back to being still again. Go back to being calm. But the stone's still under there. It's now part of the lake. It might look as it did before, but it's forever changed.
I love that scene. And it's just because it's like whatever we go through in life, it shapes us into who we are,
Yeah.
right? It just continues on. Like all those stones that get thrown into that rock that puts us through this whole ripple in life. And then even though we're like, okay, the roller coaster is over, everything's fine, but you're still carrying all those rocks with you. And I just felt so validated in a sense, because I was like, I feel seen, and I know at the time, like, you kind of feel like you're the only one. But I know I'm not alone when it comes to that. And that scene, like, literally, it's been 30 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And I can like quote that scene so much. So I love what you said about how you created these with the characters and the stories, and putting them through these obstacles that we could understand.
Yeah, it's again, it's identifiability, but recognizing. At the last convention, there was a conversation that came up about one of the characters that I had created for the series, and then the whole question about how I create the characters. And I've actually lectured on this, where I've said, if and those of you who have heard me talk about this, you can go ahead and get a cup of coffee. But don't leave for too long. We got interesting stuff. I've said, if you pick your best friend, the person you know everything about, odds are you probably only knew 20% of who they are, because there's an 80% that's under the surface. But without that 80%, that 20% couldn't exist. So whenever I create my characters, I always remind myself that what I'm showing of this character is built on that 80% that I either have to actually technically figure out myself or emotionally feel myself. And by the way, that clip, you had it marked as Athens City of the Bards. It's actually, that was Dreamworker, actually.
Was that Dreamworker?
Yeah, that was at the end of Dreamworker, yeah.
Because I was all like, I couldn't remember what the end of the episode was, and Google failed. So
there you go. Yeah, that's the great God, Google. Believe me, no foul, no foul. Right. But yeah, I do remember when I was writing that scene, because there's a thing that we commonly refer to as sap up the wrap up. Basically, you read the end of an episode, and you want to give that little sappy thing that the audience will remember. And I, of course, don't want it to be a sappy thing. I want it to be meaningful. Sometimes it can be meaningful comedically. Like the end of Hoods and Harlots is kind of a comedic little walk away. Well, I'm a princess. I'm a queen, whatever. But it actually meant a lot for the rest of the series, that differentiation. It set up a lot of the future stories. But when examining the character of Xena and how she would explain that she can't possibly leave that evil past of her behind, she can't do it. There's no way. But to have the innocence of Gabrielle saying, but you don't look like that. You don't seem like that. There had to be a way to explain that. And so the lake scene is what I came up with. Well,
it was beautifully done. And even for someone who was 10, 11 years old, I understood it.
Thank you.
And so, of course, it wasn't until I was just a little bit older where I really figured out the meaning, right? Because that's the formative years of being a teenager. But definitely it was very, very inspiring. Now, of course, this is a Star Trek podcast. So
it is? Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. I'm sorry. You're like, wait.
Well, looking around.
You're like, what do I have?
Yeah, I know. All right, I'm ready.
There we go. All right, you're ready. So, as you can see, you're a fan of Star Trek.
I've been definitely a Trek. This actually used to be in my desk at Xena. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There's every creative person with an office. You have a desk, which is, I call it the tchotchke desk. A drawer in your desk, which is filled with nonsense things that just relieve the creative effort. You just sit there and you play with them. Sometimes it's a little koosh ball and this was this. Back when it worked, I would zap people. It actually worked. There you go.
You're like,
Type 2 phaser.
Boom. There you go.
That's fun.
Now, I basically wanted to mention this. So you had posted this on your Instagram for Bill Shatner's birthday. And you said, when I was just a kid, I watched classic Star Trek. It's the pivotal TV series of my childhood. When my neighborhood friends and I would play Star Trek fantasies in the yard, I was always Captain Kirk. That kid never knew he'd actually meet the man who embodied that character and talk about how the show and his character affected him. Beautiful tribute. But Do you feel your love of Star Trek has inspired you in a lot of ways in your writing?
Well, yes. I mean, Star Trek did all versions of Star Trek really. Having said that, I haven't seen all the versions. I've seen bits and
Right.
pieces. So,
Yeah.
the ones I saw mostly were classic, and then a lot of next gen. But Roddenberry and his team, they also tried to explore the human spirit, and they also made a lot of people realize, a lot of creators realize, that if you confront somebody with the evils of reality right now, people tend to put up their walls. But if you hide it in a fantasy, or you hide it in a futuristic story where they feel somewhat detached and they can actually look at it, that can make a difference in people's lives. The classic Trek episode, which of course I used to be able to think of all the titles. I used to know all the titles. But it's the one with the two characters who Frank Gorshin played one of the characters, and they are at war with each other. They're different races. And the revelation is that, they're white on one side, black on the other side. And you can't figure out, well, why are they fighting? And then the person says, you don't understand. He's white on the left side. I'm black on the left side. And you kind of look at that and you went, wow, that's kind of like the silliness of racism all in one little succinct line. So, yeah, Star Trek did a lot of that. Then when you got to Next Gen was more open with it. There were some episodes, quite honestly, that did not have much in the way of adventure, but they told one heck of a moral story, and you found yourself more riveted by that, by how those characters reacted to things. I mean, the characters were much more highly evolved in an emotional and acceptance state than we were allowed back in the 60s or in the 70s. But they still had things to deal with. They still had issues to deal with, and they still had to interact with each other with these incredibly vastly different backgrounds. So, yeah, I mean, in that case, I was those characters were resonating with me.
One thing that I loved about, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm a Beverly Crusher fan. One thing that I adore about her character was how much I feel represents a lot of what Trek means, what Roddenberry's vision is. So that compassion, the hope, love and kindness and everything. As a doctor, sometimes she would be at Captain Picard and be like, I don't agree with you, and I'm going to fight with you on this one. And she was going to tell her how it is, whether she won the argument or not. She still was, put her foot down and, let him know how she felt. But, those kind of role models, especially for women, it's so important. Like Xena, seeing them stand up to authority, or, fight for the little person, or fight just for, anybody of any color, or, in this case, alien, it didn't matter to Beverly. It was just like, you're a humanoid, you're an alien, whatever you are, and you're going to be treated with respect. Right.
I'll tell you what that character symbolized to me. And I really do think this was the character's function, and that's not a demeaning thing. There was an important function in this, and Gates did a wonderful job with this because she was very subtle. That basically represented the motherhood. That was the nurturing stage of us. Yeah. Because even when she had arguments, and even if you, the viewer, said, yeah, she's not quite right on this, you knew it came from the heart of a mother who was being protective. So Beverly has always been that. Every time I have watched the episode, when I first started watching the episode, obviously, with Wesley, but it was more extended to all the characters there. Yeah. So, and as I said, Gates did a really good job. It could have been overdone and people would have just dismissed it, but she didn't. She was very subtle with it. Very subtle.
Yeah. No, I think that's, and that was also something too that we didn't really see back then, with single moms having a career, just being all like, I could do both. It's cool. Yeah. It's fine. And I was a single mom for a very long time, and, just trying to work and provide for my daughter. And so that was nice to be represented in that way.
Yeah. And also being in a command structure where nobody diminished you merely for your gender. You were given that equal voice and respected for the voice you brought to the table. That was, Roddenberry's, a lot of his vision. That was right there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you did mention to me that you had spoken to Michael Piller, who was the
Mhm.
showrunner of TNG, and then also at some point might have been part of Enterprise. So, how did that come about and why did it all fall through?
It's interesting that there were a few shows that I really loved as a child. Time Tunnel was another one, but Trek, obviously, that one just molded me so much.
Mhm.
It is interesting that because of my love for Trek, or I should say, in spite of my love for Trek, that's the one franchise I've never worked in. Never. And it actually amazes people who knew me back then when I was a kid. They're like, why? And of course, every now and then somebody would say, you know what you need to do? You need to work on Star Trek. And I'm like, oh, gosh, yeah, let me make a phone call.
Right.
So now with Michael, I had a meeting with Michael just as a regular pitch meeting. And we hit it off. I pitched, as I normally go with 4 or 5 ideas. And none of those worked for whatever reason. But sometimes it's like we're already doing a story like that. Or some other reason. And the meeting was great. And by the way, for people out there who are trying to get meetings like that, keep in mind, you can fail to sell something in a meeting, but it's still a wonderful meeting because the door is open. They want you back.
Mm-hmm.
So this happened several times with Michael. I would go in and pitch and go in and pitch, and we just could not get something going. And at one point, I remember Michael said to me, he said, Steve, we've got to get you in here and get you working on something. And I said, Michael, write out a contract, slide it across the table. I'll sign it. It's done. Of course, that's not the way it works.
Right.
So, and it just didn't happen. Now I also met with Ron Moore for Voyager one time and talked to him with a few ideas. One of my ideas I still think would have been awesome. But anyway, but nothing happened there. I think Ron is exceptional, certainly as a creator and storyteller. Mm-hmm. And then with Enterprise, my agent had called me and said that Paramount wanted me to come in and talk to Brannon and Rick Berman, Brendan Braga and Rick Berman, because they were about to go into the 2nd season of Enterprise. And there were certain things that I was really good at that Paramount said, oh, well, we're interested in bringing Steve aboard because he's really good with plot, adventure, comedy, character. It's like, okay, I'm, this is a pretty talented group. I'm not sure what I can bring to it, but I will. Mm-hmm. And so we had a few meetings, and as far as, well, according to the staff who was already working on the show, they thought I'd already been hired. I remember talking to a couple of the writers, and they were like, oh, have you looked at your office yet? I'm like, well, haven't even gotten a contract. I'm not hired here. So this was to come on to be probably a co-exec producer on the show. However, shortly after that, I don't know the politics behind it, but Rick and Brannon left the show. And then Matty Kodo, he came onto the show. And so they didn't need me. And I actually thought he did a pretty good job with the show, but I didn't follow it religiously. But I think all the issues that Paramount was concerned with, I think he actually took care of those issues. So that was my sideswiping. Then the only other time I actually almost got on it, a friend of mine knew about this, that, my frustration of never having to work on the show. And it was where they were doing the first Star Trek movie. They were shooting it, the reboot. Mm-hmm. And so this friend of mine was an extra, and he knew whoever was casting the actress. And he just called me. He says, look, you want to be an extra? Just, I'll ask my friend here, come on down and, we can get you all suited up and you can be an extra. And I thought, okay, fine. At least I'll be in the background. Unfortunately, there was a writer's strike that year and I couldn't cross the line. So I didn't get on there. Oh, well.
Oh my goodness. It's like you get so close and then all of a sudden, poof, it just goes into warp.
It is interesting. Yeah. But,
that's so funny.
That's the way it goes. And I certainly have known people who have worked on the shows. So, it all works itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you be interested in doing any of the new projects? Like, I know Strange and New Worlds, season 3 is about to come out. They still have a couple more seasons left. And then they're doing, Starfleet Academy and, they got some ideas.
Oh, yeah. No,
I would love to see your name up there at some point.
Well, me too. But I think I don't know if they feel that I'm necessary because it's kind of hard to argue with success. It's not like I can come in and say, I'm going to fix your problems.
That's true. That's true.
No, it's
Oh,
all
man.
good stuff, and it is just so interesting that this one little wagon train to the stars back in the 60s launched this incredibly intricate universe that people still play in to this day.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any for your thoughts?
All right. So Phil from Phil Better Podcast, he says, picking your favorite episode you wrote is similar to picking a favorite child. So instead, what is the one episode you wish you could rewrite to be better?
Oh, good. I didn't have to repeat what I said earlier. Phil already took care of the premise.
Yeah.
What is the one episode you wish you could rewrite to be better? All of them. I'm not kidding. All of them. It's not that I think that they're bad. It's just that I know every avenue I could have taken, every choice I made. And there's a part of me just wants to go back and play in those playgrounds and make other choices, see what happened with them. Now, there are some episodes that, you have to have studio comments, network comments. You don't always agree with them. They give you notes, they give you input, and sometimes it's just not your vibe. But I've actually worked with some pretty good executives, but I've managed to look at those as opportunities. I'll address their note, but that gives me an opportunity to explore something else. So I will say that every one of them is one that I could rewrite to be better. So I'm only saying that because it just means rewrite it to be different. And what I'm really saying is I would love to go back and play around again. Just play in the sandbox. It would be great.
Yeah.
But, so, and by the way, I don't go back and watch my episodes. I don't, because of that, because I sit there and I'll go, oh man, I could have done this. I could have done that. Sometimes I'll look at clips because let's be honest, if you're working with other people who are creative, directors, actors, the music, the sound effects, all of the stuff, working behind the scenes, you appreciate that a lot more. And you'll go and you'll watch an episode, and I will try to ignore what I participated in, but I just sit there and say, man, these are amazing people, and I got a chance to work with them.
Nice. Love that. Stephen, you are a delight. I absolutely enjoyed talking with you tonight. Can you just let my listeners know where they can find you, if you have anything to plug?
Right here. Come on over.
Here on my YouTube channel. That's where you're at.
Well, I have the usual social media, or at least the usual social media for somebody my age. Actually, it's not true. I no longer have MySpace. So on Facebook, I'm there.
I no longer have Twitter.
Nobody has that. Nobody gets it.
I know, right?
Stephen L. Sears. If you Google Stephen L. Sears, you'll probably find some of that on Instagram and Threads and X. My handle there is FSU Writer. FSU stands for Florida State University, where I got my degree in theater, and then writer. But if you actually go to my website, which is StephenLSears.com, and it's one word, Stephen L. Sears, it'll bring up some stuff that looks cute, but also there's little links that'll take you to my social media. And make sure you put the L. The L is important. I tell people that if you put in StephenSears.com, you will go to a website that teaches children how to clean their ears. I'm not kidding. So Stephen L. Sears, one word. That's where you can find me.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. They're all like, man, he stopped his writing and everything. Going to the wrong website. They're like, what happened to him?
Well, I like to think is when people hear my dialogue, they go, I'm sorry, what was that?
You're like, what? That's the perfect picture. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Stephen, for your time.
Absolutely.
Always, hit me up here on Friday nights. I'm going to be having some real fun topics with you guys. But as always, live long and prosper, and have a good night. Bye, guys. Don't forget, you can listen to all the audio versions of Crusher Combo on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can support the podcast by buying merch on TeePublic, buy me a coffee by scanning that QR code,
or becoming a Patreon member for as low as $3 a month. But the best way to support Crusher Combo is to like and subscribe here on YouTube. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, or TikTok, so please follow me there. And of course, all this information can be found on crushercombo.com.
Crusher out.